Well, Nelson Ford from the Gunsmith in Phoenix, Arizona. And these are my favorite. They're easiest to do. Question answers. Let's see what we got. Mr. Ford, one question. Can you show us how to peen cylinder notches? The question would be, why does it happen on a K-frame and how could we prevent it? Well, it's a combination of things. That cylinder spinning around real fast and trying to stop and how hard the cylinder is. Not all the guns are the same. Some are, you know, 38, some are 40, some are 42, Rockwell or whatever. And the ones that are softer are going to want to peen over more. Also, there's another thing that can happen. Um, not all the guns are the same. The biggest mistake people make with any mechanical device is that right down the line they all have the same this, they all have the same measurement here, they all have the same measurement there, and nothing could be less true. The cylinder stop is going to stick out a different amount on every gun you measure your entire life. Not no two are going to be the same. You can adjust them. You can bring them up and make so they engage more. You can also elongate the slot if you have one that's bobbing, going down and bobbing back up. You can elongate the slot to the far side and move it further onto the trigger tab. There's a hundred things you can do with those cylinder stops, and they're all going to affect. If they don't have a whole lot of them coming through the window, that's going to have more an effect on your cylinder notches. And I've got a ball peen hammer I've been using since I was 22, 21 years old. Same hammer. And I know the weight of it. I know the feel of it. I know where everything is. I constantly clean the face of it. And I actually took the inside of a yoke. The cylinder sits on here and the air part goes into the frame. And it was, there's a track in there that your screw goes into that holds your yoke in place. And I don't know how this happened. It looked like somebody took a 20-pound sledge and tried to push the yoke off because they completely bent out that little the little tab at the end of your yoke that goes in your frame, completely bent it out. And I spent a half hour using a block of wood and just tapping it with my little ball peen hammer until I got it in and down and in and down and in and down and shaped it and a little bit worn and down. I got that thing right back where it belonged. And the guy that brought me the gun brought me another yoke and cylinder because that one wouldn't fit in the gun, wouldn't fit back in. And I got it to go right back in the gun and work right. So anything can be peened. You can't show somebody how to peen something. I mean, I can do a video, but literally, I'm just going to have the cylinder sitting there on a block of wood. I'm going to be tapping it, and you have to have a feel for your tool. You have to have a feel for what you're doing, and that just comes to you. I bend the mainsprings to achieve a particular weight for the different frames and ignition styles on Smith revolvers. I cover that in Smith and Wesson Tuning Part One or Part Two, and people say, "How do you do it?" Sometimes it takes me 4 or 5 or 6 tries. Other times I can, I get it right off the bat. And so the peening thing is going to be the same thing. I don't know your vision level, but I can see fine without my glasses up close. I need them. When I go to do that sort of thing, I'm under 4 power, so I can actually see everything happening as live as I'm doing it. And that's what you're going to have to do if you want to peen those back. You're going to have to get a ball peen hammer you're happy with, that you've used for a long time, and you're going to have to watch what you do. It's all everything is learning. You can't really be taught anything if you go to the Colorado School of Trades. Your aptitude is going to be everything, and your ability and your zest for it. They can't just take anyone and turn him into a gunsmith. It's got to be something you want to do and you have a feel for. Or just willing to learn is not always going to help. It's how well you work with the feedback coming into your head during the operation, as you make constant adjustments as you're doing something in your physicality in what you're doing. So try it. Just a 19. What you call a sear spring, I've always known as a combination spring. It is a combination spring, but if you look at the Colt journal, it'll say sear spring. and then they'll say sear leaf, disconnect leaf, and um, grip safety spring. Thank you for this info. Where does one purchase the sear jig? Is it original Colt? No, the sear jigs I got. It's a Tommy Wilson jig, not Bill. Tommy Wilson jig. I got it from Brownells, and I know it seems like they never have anything in stock anymore, and I don't love them any more than I have to. I used to spend $1,000 a month with them, and I don't call them unless I absolutely have to. And it's a sad story. Um, I used to know everybody there very well, and it's they've changed over their employees 4 or 5 times since I started ordering from them in 1980 summer, and they've changed so radically. It used to be the girls that answered the phone. There were several Beverleys, and one of those Beverleys used to be Kyle Brownell's babysitter. Okay, and now he's, I don't know how old he is, 60 years old or something, but that used to be his babysitter, one of the first gals I called when I called Brownells. And you could get a hold of Bob and say, Bob, I need to talk to you. And I requested that he start carrying accessories for the 45 ACP model 1911. And he wrote me a letter back thanking me for such a great idea. And now there's 40 pages of 1911 accessories in there. So the world changes radically. So I've got Phil from Chicago. He's got a Browning high power. He wants to know carrying hammer down, carrying hammer back, what's safest. The original Browning high powers had a safety on them that was hard to work and it was small. And the hammer springs on those guns, and the reason I mention that is the safety switch is the pivot for the hammer. So when you jack that hammer up to 30 pounds or whatever it is, man, that safety doesn't want to move. You drop it down to 20 or 22 pounds. I get my springs from Bill Lowridge's place, Cylinder and Slide. And you back that spring down, it helps, but it still had the little switch on it. And then somewhere in the late 80s, I think, early 90s, they weren't FN Brownings anymore. They were assembled in Portugal, and they were good guns, real good. They put an ambi on them that was more formidable, had a bigger switch, easier to use, and then when you threw the lighter hammer spring on the gun, it got a lot easier to use. But and also when they went to the Portugal gun, or maybe just before, they put a teeter totter in there. The teeter totter was always there. 1935 on the teeter totter, you pull the trigger and it had a bar on the back of the trigger that went up, kind of like the Smith revolver has that hand on it. And that little actuator went up. There's a teeter bar, you pushed it and it had a pivot on it. And I think Bill Lowridge or somebody moved the pivot point to make it a lighter trigger, giving you more angle on the pivot. And it would come down and push the sear out of the way for the hammer, and the hammer would fall. And if you just take that double or spring out from behind the hammer, it makes the whole thing easier to operate. But somewhere along, I think late 80s, that teeter bar, they also used it to block the firing pin. And so you had to pull the trigger. You have the firing pins up here in the slide. You had to pull the trigger, and the teeter bar came down, and the bars would block the firing pin. And so that was a really important thing. It was kind of not a Series 80 system, but it was a firing pin block system. And then when they put that in there, it made the gun safe to carry in any fashion. Prior to that, if you don't have that safety bar lock in there, I would not carry it with the hammer down on a live round. There's a half cock notch. I would use that. Strong half cock notch. For the people that want to leave the safety off, draw and pull the hammer back. And that would make it a live round safe. It's better to leave the safety switch on. You want a positive lock. On the Browning high powers, they had a little spring and a little plunger with a point on it that sat in the safety. And it worked against a raise in the frame, sort of where the grip was, and it had two little holes or detents in the frame, and that plunger would give you your lock up and lock down. And so you could go to a stronger spring for a stronger lock on it, or a weaker spring, or polish the front of the ball. But if you were going to carry cocked and locked, those big switches, and the ambi's got the one on the outside, there's a lot going on with those ambies sitting there. They can come off. You would want that lock to be really positive. If I was to carry one, you're gonna laugh. I'd carry it hammer down on an empty. I'd draw and work the gun like that. And I was in a situation once coming back from 43rd Avenue and Van Buren before we had freeways here. This is early 80s. I had a nickel plater way out there. And the west side, southwest side of town is a little more lively than the northeastern side of Phoenix or Scottsdale. And I was in a '72 Dodge, and I was just coming back on. I just mentioned the road. As I was coming back, I had a 1911 next to me, hammer down, live magazine, empty chamber, and I pulled up to a light, and I just looked to the right, and right outside my window was a group of people that looked like they were interested in meeting me. And I had time to grab the gun and throw around in it, throw the safety on, and that's all it took. They all backed up. They just saw me put a round in, and I was lucky I had the time. Um, I've had my son tell me, "Don't worry, Dad. We'll buy you some time to get a round in your chamber." And so I shouldn't be telling other people how to carry. Um, when I walk in the morning, I carry a 5-shot 38, and when I travel, I carry a high cap 9 because I think I might need more rounds. So on the high power, if you want a live round in the magazine, I would have safety off on the hammer notch. If you want to cock back as you go. So let's go to the next one here. Greetings, Mr. Ford. If I may ask, what are your thoughts on dry firing? You have to dry fire to get to know your gun. And I tell a lot of people on the revolvers, leave your empties in there. You can dry fire all day long. It'll keep your firing pins from exiting your gun. I've heard him go right across the store in front of in my front room. I know there are no absolutes when it comes to almost everything, but I was wondering how you might feel about it, especially concerning S&W double actions and maybe 1911s, if you wouldn't mind. The 1911s, I'm not worried about. The firing pins are really cheap and easy to finish, easy to change. Dry firing, dry firing is God's own. It's going to make you familiar with your gun. The more you fumble with your gun, the better. But you want to check your gun. If you're watching TV and playing with your gun, you want to check it every time there's a commercial, see if it's loaded. That's what I tell people. Every commercial, check your gun to see if it's loaded. Somehow they load themselves.
Are there any guns you would advise not dry firing?
The only guns I would dry fire, well, expensive old single actions is just foolish. But leave empties in there, and then you can do it. The only things I'm really worried about is high dollar over unders and side by side. You're going to pay some money to get firing pins in those, and then other things like I think early Woodsmans and high standards and a few others, the 22 rimfires. They should be set up to where they won't hit, but they do. And somebody was telling me the Ruger 22 was hitting the chamber wall there, or the chamber face, and making a mark, and where it's making a mark, and that's wrong. There's something wrong with that pin. There's an opening. It should be allowed to only travel as far as it can without doing damage up there. And if it is, first thing I do is I push the firing pin forward in the bolt and see how much is sticking out. And I think you want about 35, 40,000, something like that. And if it's sticking way out, then you can take a little bit off of it so it's not doing that damage. Buy an extra firing pin before you start cutting on the one you have, so you have one to just drop in there if you get bad on it. Let's see. Here's a guy who says, Nelson, Wasn't that called the Thompson-Lagarde test? Memory serves me, they did at least a portion of the test at large stockyard on live BBs. You're right. And if actually, I have mixed feelings about it, but if you do some reading, I think you'll find they actually used human cadavers for some of that testing. Why do some smiths have a hammer nose spring and others do not? The hammer nose spring is good stuff. Um, very early on, I was lucky to learn different lessons. I was lucky to know Glenn Martin. He's probably the best all-around gunsmith I've ever known. Most people specialize. You can bring him a rifle and need stock work, need a barrel change, bring in a 1911 and need sights and whatever. He can do it all. And early on, I called him up and I said, I'm having some misfires with my Model 14 at the National Guard Armory in Shoots. And he said, do you have the gun with you? And I said, yes. He said, cock the hammer back. Grab the firing pin. Is it loose? I said, yes. And I said, I'm having to run 48 ounces on it plus in order to get it to fire all the time with my reloads. He said, pop the rivet out, and that's what they're called, hammer nose rivets. Pop the rivet out, take out the firing pin, chuck it up between two pennies in your vise, slot it with a cutoff wheel, take a tiny spring, stick it in behind it, and re-rivet it in the gun. And I did that, and I was able to go down to 40 ounces. So it bought me a half pound of hammer pressure. And so, why are some loaded and some are not? I can't answer that. I do know that through the 60s, the K frames did not have hammer nose springs. The N frames did. Then before World War II, none of them did. And then when the Brits took over, I think they started the L frame, and it Baker, Mr. Baker's the one that stretched the frame from Ruger. Um, but the L frames came out with the firing pin spring loaded. And when they did that, I think they decided to do it across the boards, not on the J's, but the K's then got the firing pin loaded with the spring. And it may have been under the Brits when the L frame came out, but they should all be loaded with the spring. Mr. Ford, this channel has been just great. Watch and learn. I was curious your thoughts on Smith & Wesson floating hand. Yeah, the floating hand appeared briefly, I believe, 80s revolvers. I see them once in a while. I saw one in the last week. I believe I did one yesterday. And if they're a problem, I'll address them. But if they're not floating. What they do is the way the spring works, the little pigtail spring in the trigger, the way it works, it holds the hand because it's planted here. It does a couple of coils and it comes back out here, so it's on this side of the interior of the trigger, and so it's pushing on this side of the handspring, and it's pushing the hand towards the cylinder. And the idea was it would keep them timed. Um, they can be a problem. There's a thing with the hand, the point of the hand being too close to the pivot of the cylinder, and you can move that pivot over a little bit on these. So your indexing or purchase position on the lug is more centralized, um, and it gets a better angle in the cylinder and turns it, and it comes up. If there's too much room in that window and the hand's not right, the hand can do a clicking thing, but non-floating hands can do the clicking thing too, and you just heat them and bend them a little. But I've learned to work with them. I know Packmeyer, back when they first saw those, added to their Smith & Wesson trigger jobs to remove that in and put in a proper what you would call floating hand. And is it overblown? I had one come in the other day, and I did trigger work on it. It was fine. It went back out. It had to be smooth, or I wouldn't let it go out. So thanks for the reply on Ruger revolvers. Been a Smith guy for 40 years and love them. Recently though, I'm hearing about bad QC and many multiple sendbacks. So giving Ruger a try. That's really silly, Robert. Um, The average age of the guns on my table that I did today on the 45 Colt, that was in 1883 to 1914. That's a 1915, and that's a 1980. So the average age on the guns here is probably near 100 years old. And so you don't have to buy a new gun. And so, telling yourself you have to buy, I don't want new guns. I don't buy them. I don't want them. I don't refinish them. I don't need them to look pristine. Um, I need them to be right. And I often ask customers when they come to the store with another brand new gun, I always ask them, when are you going to buy a real one? And the real ones have the firing pin on the hammer. I'll work them all. I can make them all smooth. I have to run 56 to 60 ounces on the new hammers. The new guns after 96. That's new to me. After 96, I have to run more power on them, and I have to run a Bill Lowry firing pin. His are, by the way, 510 to 512 in overall length, and they come at 490 and 491. And I had a guy tell me I put a pin in there. It's from some manufacturer. I don't want to mention them, and I mic'd it today. Um, today, today or yesterday, I mic'd it, and it was at 504. And we're splitting hairs, saying another 8 thousandths is going to make the difference. But when your firing pin protrusion is 45 thousandths, and you have 10 thousandths headspace behind the cartridge, now you're down to 35 thousandths, and you just give up another 8 thousandths, now you're down to 27 thousandths. And so things start to add up there. The bill averages are 512. I did the guy's gun, I think, at 56 or 60 ounces with less than 10 thousandths behind the cartridge and in front of the recoil shield. And then we got solid hits. We got solid hits from the gun. So it's going to be fine. But if you bring me in a Model 27 dash 2 firing pin on the hammer, that's firing pin's farthest distance from the pivot point on that hammer, as it's an end frame. And you have the small pistol primer and the old ignition system. 3 things working for you. We can run those things at 38 ounces and they light up any primers. And so there are dramatic differences. And when you do that, there's other things that play in there. It's just not, a little bit more power, a little less power on the hammer. You have a trigger return mechanism called a rebound slide assembly with a cam on the top of it, and it returns the hammer. After it fires, it brings the hammer back away from through the shield. And so now, instead of running 2 coils out of the returns box with a 35 thousandths coil diameter spring, now we're running 3 coils because we're running more power on the hammer to light up the gun. So now everything is connected. You just can't say, we had to change hammer weight. Now we have to change trigger return weight in order to have the same speed on your trigger return. So it's really more complex than you think. Guns are cool. I wish I was younger because I'd like to work on them another 25 years. I'm running out of time here. And I've got a dinner date. So I've enjoyed answering some questions. There's still some here. We'll go through some more of these and do some more Q&As. Thank you very much for watching.